what was like the craziest and like top highlight in your drive-through history years?
I always tell people that it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that's the best contender for the crucifixion location. It's a surprise for a lot of people is that it's not very far away from what is recognized as being probably the likely burial site for Christ as well.
Hey guys, welcome back to today's episode. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at biblical and world history, filmmaking, travel, behind the scenes of what goes into making a TV series.
Today we have a very special guest. He's the host of Drive Thru History, but first, cue the intro.
Over 2,000 years ago, the man known as Jesus of Nazareth was born in the small town of Bethlehem in the land of Judea. His extraordinary life, brutal execution, and miraculous resurrection from the dead attest to the truth of his claim to be the only Son of God. This is the story of how Jesus, through the lives of his faithful followers, has become known around the world, impacting all of human history from the first century until today. This is Drive Thru History, Ends of the Earth.
Please welcome Dave Stotts.
How's it going, guys? Nice to be with you today.
Thanks so much for
Thanks
joining
for
us.
Yeah, you're welcome. We all have very manly, robust Old Testament names, so we can start a little clique if you would like.
Yeah.
David.
Only
Solomon,
my wife calls
Samson.
me David, so everybody else kind of knows me as Dave.
All right, Dave, you mind maybe sharing us a little bit about drive-through history and the different things you've done over the years with that?
I'd be glad to. So Drive Thru History is an on-location history show that takes the viewer on a journey to the places that historical events, actually happened. So our initial idea was to portray me as the host, but I would be more of a character. This was our idea many, many years ago. I was like a Sunday school teacher that my students in Sunday school were bored, and so I somehow magically got on a plane and transported over to Rome, Greece, Turkey, Israel, the Holy Lands, and decided I'm going to do on-location Bible stories. And so that was our initial idea. It morphed into just more of a travel history on-location sort of adventure show with me as sort of a host to take viewers kind of on this road trip to explore the people and the places and the events of world history with the eye toward recognizing the fingerprints of God in world history. And so we talk a lot about the general historical context of Bible stories and Bible history and church history and Christian history generally as the context, but then our main point is to really dive into the history of our faith, the saints and martyrs and heroes from the Bible and church history to try to inspire viewers with this idea that our faith is resting on something historical and true and using the Bible as kind of a bedrock for that. So that's essentially the kind of the driving force, if you will, behind the show and the idea. And along the way, we try to have as many adventures as we can. Some of them are impromptu, some of them are planned. So we use this theme of driving throughout the series as well. So when I get to a location, I try to get my hands on a car that's fun to drive, that looks good on camera, that might have something to do with the country we're visiting. So sometimes we'll get a vintage Mercedes-Benz in Germany, or an Alfa Romeo in Italy, or a retro Mini Cooper in the UK, those kinds of things. And then in Israel, we got our hands on this car. It's a Land Rover we nicknamed Steve McQueen. Actually, the owner nicknamed it Steve McQueen, and we drove that all around Israel. So driving is kind of the way I get from place to place, from ruin to ruin, from church to church. And it becomes, in some ways, kind of like a character in the series itself.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's very fascinating and interesting to know about the show.
Yeah, so maybe going into how did you get growing up, maybe how'd you get to the point where you are now with Drive Thru History and with your faith? Like you said, you're coming in order with the Bible and stuff like that, and how you're integrating that in the show, and kind of where you ended up now.
Yeah, so I grew up, I'm peak Generation X, and we Gen Xers, we think back to the 80s, and we were raised on cool pop culture and movies like Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And I will never forget that night in 1981. I sat in a darkened theater and watched the coolest movie that's ever been made, the best movie that ever will be made, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And, that makes an impression on a young boy when you watch a man's face melt off of his skull. And that was a really sort of formative thing for me, because you have this hero, Indiana Jones, Han Solo, and he takes the Bible seriously. At least he did in that particular film. And he goes on this epic journey to look for the Ark of the Covenant. And that collision of, something I'm seeing in an exciting, movie with my love of the Bible, and it kind of awakened something in me, and I didn't know it at the time, but I think it was planting some seeds in my heart that I wanted to be a part of that mysterious world where history and the Bible and adventure come together. And if you fast forward to after I graduated college, this is going to be in the mid '90s, I actually went on a trip to do a documentary on the location, this theory that the Ark of the Covenant, the one that the Hebrews built in the Old Testament, was located. And there's this theory that it actually exists in modern day Ethiopia. And we went on this journey to go visit these monks in this secluded village in northern Ethiopia. And it was just the coolest trip of my life, at least up to that point, and maybe even looking back. I've been on some cool trips, but that trip was awesome because I sort of felt, I know it sounds sort of dumb and corny, but I sort of felt a little bit like Indiana Jones, because I'm doing a documentary about the location of the Ark of the Covenant. If I ever found it, I wouldn't want to touch it or look at it because I didn't want to melt my face off or anything like that. But we visited these monks and we did this documentary. That came out back in the 90s. And I don't even know if you can find it anymore, but it was an exciting time for me. And that just planted that seed deeper in my heart, where I was just excited about history and the Bible and how that can combine with video production, because, I was into video. That's always been what I've done. My dad bought me a video camera when I was a young boy, and I, like you guys, I've seen some of your work, some of the fun videos you guys make, little movie spoofs and things like that. I did a ton of that stuff growing up. Cool. I did Indiana Jones spoofs, James Bond, you name it. I was constantly doing little home movies. I wanted to go to Hollywood and be a film director. I'm really glad I didn't. Because I actually like this type of work better because it aligns more with my faith. Hollywood is not a place known for aligning with anybody's faith. So so this to me is kind of exactly my sweet spot for what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
So
Wow.
I guess I didn't answer your question as far as like, how did I get into Drive Thru History? Well, a good friend that I go way back with, 25 years, was with me on that Ark of the Covenant trip. We stayed connected and stayed friends. I left the production world to go into seminary, and I thought maybe I want to be a pastor or something like that. So I started seminary courses, but he wanted to continue to work with me. So he and I collaborated on some other documentaries. So we put this idea together where we would, actually the spark of it was we were in the city of Rome on a layover, killing time between flights, and we went down to this road called the Appian Way. It's an ancient road that goes back thousands of years, huge 2,000-year-old cobblestones on this ancient road. And we were visiting some catacombs that the early Christians were buried in. And so my friend says, hey, Dave, why don't you rent one of these tourist bicycles that are over here, and here's a camera, aim it back on yourself and narrate something about the Appian Way. And I'd never really done anything like that. Cameras back then were not tiny little lightweight iPhone cameras. It was like a heavier camera. So I rented this bicycle and I started riding my bike down the Appian Way, holding the camera up in front of me, trying to narrate and remember anything I might know about this ancient road. Cars still drive on this road, and cars were whizzing by, and I lost balance after building up some speed. I lost control of the bike, and the handlebars went because it got stuck between the ancient cobblestones, and I flew over the handlebars and landed on the Appian Way and cut open my elbow. And Jim, my friend, runs over to me, and he wants to make sure that the camera's okay and the bike is okay.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, are you okay too? And anyway, there was something about that being the beginning of all this that I find rather comical because yeah, it sort of launched. You can even find that clip where I go over the handlebars. I kept the camera rolling. Thank you very much. and so it's a pretty comical moment.
That's cool. So then from that kind of then you guys started to hit it off well, and then thought the idea of combining like comedy, history, and Bible kind of archaeology and putting it all together kind of and making this like history show where you would kind of travel through time and then start that kind of that series.
Yeah, that was back in 2003, I believe.
Wow.
When we started. So not when I crashed the bike, that was earlier, but and then we decided, Jim and I decided, let's go do this series and see what happens. We didn't really have scripts. We didn't have a lot of research. We kind of just went to Rome, Greece, and Turkey to talk about the ancient sort of historical context for the early church. And we just went from location to location and got a weird car. It was a Fiat Doblo, which was the ugliest car you can imagine. And so that ended up being a funny gag in the show, is making fun of this silly car. And we just drove around from place to place. And we had a cameraman. He would aim it at me, and I would just kind of narrate from some research and some loose scripts that we had kind of cobbled together. And we came back with a boatload of footage. And I started kind of editing these shows together. It's a weird thing to edit yourself. You guys probably know a little bit what that feels like. Yeah. I stare at myself quite a bit when I edit these shows. I'm sure I'm developing some sort of deep-seated personality narcissism disorder or something like that. But started making shows and developed the style and the pacing. I decided I want to use a whole lot of artwork in the shows. Nobody wants to just stare at me the whole time, walking around cluelessly. And so I load up the shows with as many cutaways as we can find of ancient artwork and maps and timelines and things like that. So it's an educational experience. It's not just a devotional sort of approach. We're trying to educate the viewers with Christian history, but also this general historical context, so that, again, Christians can be reminded that ours is a historical faith rooted in time, space, history, and the Bible is something that can be relied upon as a source of history and truth.
Mm. No, yeah. Something I just randomly came to my mind is, how did you guys come up with the production of the Drive Thru History song? What was the idea in that? How did you guys maybe come up with like the music to get the idea, and then maybe who designed your logo? Because we really like that, and it's just a question I had.
Yeah, a good friend of ours, a graphic designer named Brian Gage, we reached out to. He developed the logo. I love that logo. I think it looks really cool. It just kind of communicates adventure and speed and cars. And as far as the theme song, we worked with a young composer, and I don't even know if he does compositions anymore, but at the time, I would say, he was probably y'all's age. He was a young dude. Oh, wow. And whose name escapes me at the moment, but he developed that theme song. And then over the years, it got more kind of embellished and more orchestral and went through some variations as time went on. But it's a catchy theme song, and all my edits over the last 22 plus years, I can't get it out of my head. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's a really cool song.
that's a really good song. Maybe going. How did you guys what goes through making a shoot? How many cameramen would be there, or camera gear, filming? Were you guys monitoring? Maybe I know just from Saul and I doing stuff like video podcasts or filming, it takes a lot of work to make sure the camera, the batteries are charged, you're mic'd up, and all that stuff. Can you kind of maybe walk us through a day? Were those days really long? And
yeah, long days. The best light is when the sun is low. So your best stuff is going to be in the mornings and in the evening, golden hour, that kind of a thing. So we try to always aim to have, something to film later in the day. But you don't always have time to dictate all of that. You just got to get the content and get it in the can and go and move on to the next spot, because we don't want to be over there for months at a time. So we usually travel with at least 2 cameras. It simplifies things when you have a host staring directly at the camera, because a side shot of that is not, if I'm looking into the camera, direct to camera dialogue, you really just need 1 camera and 1 A cam for that. The B cam guy is off getting cutaway shots of the ruins and pillars and aqueducts and theaters and all this stuff that are at these archaeological sites and churches and maybe culture and things like that. And then maybe when he's done, we'll fly a drone. We take drones everywhere we go. The world is kind of weird about drones now. You either have to get a lot of permits for that, or you just won't get to fly. Or you were forced to hire a local drone crew. Sometimes we do that too, but we try to mix in as many aerials as we can, because seeing it from the air gives you a better sense of scale, of the size of some of these archaeological sites and churches, rather than just like a camera on the ground. So, and we have our A camera is always on some kind of a gimbal that keeps things smooth and floating, so it allows me to walk around. If I'm rotating around a pillar or walking through an arch or under an aqueduct, it just makes the footage a little bit more interesting than just a guy standing there like a reporter.
Yeah.
We're trying to always make the camera feel like it's part of the adventure.
Yeah.
No, yeah, is there, what goes into maybe preparation even for that too? Because obviously all that's so much work. Does it take a while to go into preparing, we're going to go to this site on this day, and permissions to use?
Yes, it does. It takes a lot of work. Pre-production is sort of the secret sauce to making these shoots actually doable, because you can't just land, hop off the plane, pull your cameras out and go. You really do have to get permission. I mean, back in the early days, there were times we didn't know what permissions were allowed or not, so we just had to kind of sort of, shoot kind of under the radar, because we weren't sure if we were allowed to do some of the filmings in certain locations. But that's ancient history. We do things by the book. We make sure we get all the permits and permissions we can. Sometimes a lot of times working with local, what we call fixers. And these are guys who are local people who host production crews from all over the world in their country. So they kind of roll the red carpet out for us in a way when we get there, to try to make things as easy as possible. They will even sometimes help us in our shoots as well. But we'll spend months on building out the content of a series before we ever get on an airplane, and that's the research, the outline, the scripting. These shows are scripted. I learned the hard way that you don't want to just wing it, because you could get a fact wrong. I got in trouble on YouTube many years ago because I got the year of Benjamin Franklin's death wrong. Only by 100 years, only by a century. And we heard it from the homeschool families who are actually probably smarter than us when it comes to this stuff. But
funny.
Yeah, so that takes a lot of months to do. The shoots we try to get done in a short amount of time as possible, because look, I'm married with 4 kids. If I'm gone for longer than about 3 weeks, I come home, I expect my locks to maybe be changed. I don't know. um, and so we'll try to film it and work really hard to get everything in the can. And then we'll spend months editing. And it's not that I'm slow editing, but I am. But it's the fact that it takes a lot of work to hunt for the art, to cut it into layers, to animate it. I use a lot of After Effects. It's an Adobe program that works well with Premiere and Photoshop. And I do a lot of work to make that art really come alive. And finding the right music to go into the shows. I mean, I'll spend days and days hunting for the right music cues to really support the content, to bring that emotion or tension or comedy to life in the edit.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks so much for sharing that. I had 3 kind of mini questions. One, I can relate with you when it comes to drone. My brother and I actually on the side, we have a real estate photography business, and so we'll do a lot of shoots for people and different agents. And so I actually had to get my drone license in here, in the
we
US.
didn't know that on our first shoot though, and then we realized the fine was like $30K.
We realized there were all the rules and regulations. I was just gonna a little story. We had another guest on one time, and they're a couple in Israel. They also live in the U.S. and they do some different archaeology videos as well. And they were sharing a funny story how sometimes in Israel, and I was just curious if you guys had any experiences like this and how you'd orchestrate this out. They would have a drone, and randomly it would just take off, he said, because the Israeli military would think maybe they don't trust any drones there. And so how did you guys, when it comes to like Israel, would you get like stock footage, or would you how did you get a lot of your drone footage that way? Did you guys have to maybe like use some, like you said, a crew, or were you like licensed or get permission?
Yeah, we would always have license. We would always make sure to do it by the book as best we could. So you're telling me that the Israeli Defense Forces took control of the drone randomly, remotely? I didn't know you could do that.
They were. I guess he said they were too. Sometimes if you're near Israeli base,
military
they can get,
base,
fishy about like if you're trying to spy on them. So they took it away, and he never got it back.
Well, yeah, that can happen. You had asked about how do we do our drone photography. Yeah, we've never had anybody take control of our drones before, but we've had them fall out of the sky because it'll come up against sort of a no-fly zone. And those are everywhere over in Israel for obvious reasons. So if you're anywhere near, like you said, a military base or something like that, there's a good chance you're not going to get it up in the air. But out in the remote areas, some of these sort of secluded archaeological spots, we'd be able to fly pretty freely and get those aerials that we wanted to get. If you go to Jerusalem, it's a non-starter. But like I said, out in the remote regions, we could always do that. It's always nice to go out to those spots anyway, because you don't want to spend your time in just Jerusalem or something like that all the time, because that's not the totality of the story, and you have a ton of tourists that are always in the way. Yeah. So we're always trying to navigate the tourism and make it appear as if I'm the only one there. So we'll wait for the big group to go by, and once they go, we can see another group coming behind them, and like, okay, go, let's roll and let's rock and get the shot, and then go. So
cool. That's great, because I feel like when we watch a show, I'm like, man, how is Dave always there by himself? There's like no one in sight or whatever, but a little bit in the background.
I mean, just today, I was editing. I told you guys I'm doing this new series from Turkey, and I've got a what we call a stand-up. It's the on direct-to-camera dialogue that I'm doing in ancient Sardis, and I'm there in front of the ruins of an ancient temple of Artemis in Sardis, and it's kind of my only good take. And right behind me is this little gaggle of Turkish boys that just kind of walk right through. And then another tourist with an annoying camera kind of walks in the distance, and so they busted the shot. So I'm having to kind of zoom in and crop it and move it over and to try to. So sometimes we have to get creative in post-production to eliminate some of those distractions. It's not we're not trying to be deceptive. There are people that come to these spots, not just us, but they're just little distracting things in the shot that I always try to get rid of.
Yeah.
So
Maybe my second question I had in regards to, I know you're talking back about the art and the editing production. I was just curious now with AI and the development of AI be able to create these like little animations and arts. Are you guys by any chance ever thought about using like maybe AI or different softwares out there to create these art visuals, or like how do you get your hands on those, and like what kind of goes behind because I always appreciated your visuals to kind of bring this story to life.
well, AI wasn't really a thing during the production of really any Drive Thru History series. So it depends. I try to use it as minimally as possible as a last resort, and in a way that nobody can tell it's AI, because you can build a pretty sweet looking animation that looks photorealistic and all the rest. But there's just, I don't know, there's that spidey sense in me that tingles a little bit that maybe this isn't the right approach, because a lot of times it almost looks too good. And a lot of it has that real kind of AI look still.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't fit most of the tone and the visual palette, if you will. I much prefer to find a public domain, high resolution, classical painting and use that instead, because it actually came from the brush of a human being. You know, not to get off all on AI, but I don't know. I hold it at arm's length. I'm sort of emotionally uninvested if something is created by nothing other than prompts alone.
Yeah.
I realize that CGI and animation is also synthetic, but there was enough human input into something like that that I am more emotionally invested in that. You know, I saw a clip online. It was Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt having a fight scene on the top of a building, and I didn't even finish it. I just looked at 5 seconds. I was like, wow, that looks amazing, and that really looks like them. But I didn't care. I just wasn't. And maybe it's a generational thing. We Gen Xers, we want to see the real stuff. I don't plan on ever going and sitting for a 2-hour movie at a theater to watch something created simply by prompts. I just don't.
Yeah.
That's not enough of a human being creating that. So I think we lose something human in our art when it's done that easily.
Yeah.
And it done mostly by the work of computers and algorithms and things like that. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I would be on board there. I'm not, when it comes to AI, it's definitely helpful for maybe a few things here and there, but I definitely like originality. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing, because I just had some thoughts on that. I've heard of others kind of using it. I was just wondering like how you guys come about that. So that's cool.
No, your guys' editing is really good. Solomon and I remember when we were younger, that's why we used to love watching it. I don't know, I think it was in one of the American History series. I remember we were blown away how, I think what was the bolts that went on the tires. I remember Solomon and I were like, that's crazy, that's so cool.
Or,
the 3D text, the floating, like everything. And so you kind of touched on it a little bit, but so who goes into all the post-production? Is that like solely you, or do you kind of branch on of other people? How do you find music? Like I know now popular is like Epidemic Sounds, but like, you know, to where you can get the rights to selling it and all that stuff. And maybe how long does that editing take? Like you said, up to months or?
Yeah, we have reached out to other talented editors. Tom Small, Josh Tabor, my friend Tom did that lug nut animation you described. He came up with that, which was really fun.
So cool.
My background is in production. Like I think I said, editing is sort of my first love. So I've edited most of these shows, and that's kind of what I just sort of sit in front of my computer in front of After Effects and Photoshop and Premiere, and I'm just kind of in my wheelhouse, and that's what I love doing. But yeah, so we do a lot of work on the back end to make these shows look really good, and it'll take a month to do, or maybe 3 weeks to do a show. Some shows have been an hour long, some shows have been 30 minutes long, but usually I would take about 3 weeks, maybe a month to do a half-hour show. And that's sort of loose, but that's kind of the idea. As far as music, We have had some things custom built, but for the majority of the time, we'll subscribe to really high quality music libraries that have extensive catalogs of music that that range from everything from orchestral adventure to, humor and comedy and cinematic. And so we will just, like I said, spend a lot of time in post-production to try to find those right cues to support the visuals, to support the content. And that's one of the things I'm uniquely interested in, is finding the right pieces of music for our content, because it just adds so much heart to it.
No, yeah. I remember we edited a video. There was the Archaeology couple that Solomon was talking about earlier. They're Sergio and Rod in Israel. We've edited one of their videos for them. I remember the music. I remember we were watching your video and trying to see, like, what song does he use here? Because the music matches so well in your guys' videos.
Yeah.
But you were talking about the cutouts and the art cutouts. So I've heard people who pay people to do art cutouts. So you do all the art cutout by yourself. And then for people who don't know, an art cutout is where you get a photo and then you're masking it out, right, to get that 3D depth effect. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it's called, they used to call it anyway, 2.5D, because it's not true 3D. These are not 3D models. And I don't even want them to be. I like the flat aspect of it. And so if you've got a guy on a horse, for example, you can use your lasso tool in Photoshop and trace around him and erase him from the background. So you've got him in the foreground. Let's say it's a guy on a horse, and he gets erased from the background, and then you use the camera in After Effects to kind of push in or rotate around, and it has this parallax effect.
That's cool.
To where it looks kind of 3D-ish, and so what might otherwise look like a flat, painting comes alive in a new way. And I started doing that back in the early 90s. Technology has just grown to where it makes that effect easier to do. Now with the click of a button, you can almost get your foreground traced out without even going through the painstaking. But I still, it's never quite gets it right. So I usually go around it and trace around it myself.
How do you, like, when you do the background, like, do you ever do, like, generate fill, or, like, do you, like, just kind of mesh the background to kind of remove them, or do you leave them there? Because I've noticed sometimes if you zoom in, sometimes you can see, like, their arm in the background or foreground, and you don't ever see that in yours.
Yeah, so I was doing this technique for many years before generative fill ever came out. But now I use generative fill because it's a lot better than the clone tool, which is what I used to do. And so I would try to clone elements of the background to fill in that hole that gets created when you delete the guy on the horse out of the shot. You delete the guy on the horse out of the shot, but you keep him. You kind of put him off to the side, and then you do your clone tool behind it to kind of erase him. Now, most of the time, a generative fill can do that 10 times better than I ever could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It definitely, those resources definitely have helped.
There actually is a tutorial I built about that technique. I did that a few years ago that I think is on. So Drive Thru History has a platform called Drive Thru History Adventures, and you can just go to drivethruadventures.com. A lot of homeschool families and churches and small groups use that platform because the shows exist in the context of a curriculum. So all the research that we've done for each of these shows is represented as a companion to the show itself. Anyway, as one of the extras in there, I have probably a half-hour, maybe hour-long tutorial on how to use Photoshop and After Effects to kind of achieve that technique. Sounds like you guys don't need that tutorial. Sounds like you've done that kind of thing enough already. But for anybody who wants to kind of dip their toe into that world, and they can get their hands on some software products like Photoshop and After Effects, that tutorial exists, and I think it's a pretty valuable thing to put in your bag of tricks.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Solomon and I, we haven't really done that, but I get what you're saying. So yeah, it's super helpful, guys. Go check it out. Was it drivethruhistoryadventures.com? Was that the?
I think that'll take you there, but I think the simpler is just Drive Thru Adventures. Yeah, and so it's this whole brand, and it is Drive Thru History. It's just done in the context of curriculum and aimed at people who want to use the shows and the curriculum for education.
Yeah, guys, we'll also have that link down below if you guys want to check that out. My other question was, I really like your Backroads little videos on the YouTube channel. Do you have that? I heard somewhere like you built that studio in your garage, or I was just wondering, where's that at? And do you guys still have that up? And do you use that a lot, or is that just not used as much?
Yeah, so I described sort of my business partner, Jim, for this show, and he built all that himself in his garage and put the Jeep in there and then just outfitted it with all of these props that are like super car related and archaeology and Bible, and he filled it out, and it's just the coolest set.
Yeah.
And we've decided to turn that into a studio. We have lighting grids and all this stuff for production in there. And we did the whole series called Bible Backroads, which is a spin-off of Drive Thru History. And there, where Drive Thru History, the main series, is really just about going on location, talking about history, talking about the Bible, characters and heroes and events. Bible Backroads is a bit different. It like goes more into the content of the Bible itself, and those become sort of like Bible studies in a way.
Yeah.
And we'll cut away to clips of the show and other things, but it's mostly me in that garage studio context, kind of doing what I always do, which is direct to camera stuff. But it's more teaching. It's more Bible stories Bible studies. And yeah, it's a great set. If anyone's ever low testosterone, they can just go hang out in this set, and it will help.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny how, like, I mean, guys, a studio can be anywhere. Like right now, we're in my bedroom. Like that's where our podcast studio is.
This is a bedroom.
Not much when it comes to budgets, but it's all as like you said, as long as you get the lighting right, the angle right, you can pull off something professional. Maybe tying into our last questions. What is your maybe favorite biblical site you've been to, or a place that just kind of stuck out that you really enjoyed? I know you mentioned that trip up on the Ark of the Covenant, but maybe more later in life when it comes to the Drive Thru History.
And then one more thing also, what would be like the craziest thing? Like, I know there's not like maybe a ton of behind the scenes with Drive Thru History, but what's like the craziest thing that's ever happened to you?
So maybe simplifying it, what was like the craziest and like top highlight in your Drive Thru History years filming those videos?
I would say one of the craziest things we did was we wondered if we could cook a piece of meat on the manifold of our engine. So we had this idea. So we got our hands on a big piece of beef. I'm not sure what cut it was, but we wrapped it in tinfoil and marinated it in Texas barbecue sauce that we had brought from the States. And we wired it to the engine manifold of this 1960-something Land Rover. And, the manifold gets really hot while you're driving. The funny thing is that once we did that, then we just hopped in the car and just started driving all over Israel and started going from place to place. And I love telling the story because it's crazy that I forgot that. I mean, how could you forget that there's meat in your engine? I forgot about it. And I remember driving around Israel and start smelling the most succulent, delicious smelling like meat. I started thinking, is this a holiday? I mean, are they celebrating the 4th of July with a bunch of backyard barbecues or something over here? And I was like, oh yeah, I've got the meat cooking, and it was wafting through the vents of this car. And yeah, so sure enough, we drove around all day, and when dinner time came, we pulled over and popped the hood and opened up the tin foil, and we chowed down.
That's cool.
Wow.
And let me tell you, it was disgusting. Yeah. You might think 5W30 motor oil would make for a bad marinade, and you would be right. Yeah. It was not that great. I think we had to get a supplementary meal after we did that little experiment. But that was a lot of fun. Yeah, as far as favorite locations, people have asked me that. I got a couple answers to that. Probably my favorite trip was to Ireland, where we spent 3 weeks exploring that whole, island to talk about St. Patrick, and we have an entire show from Ends of the Earth, and another show we did on holidays, and so we did an entire hour on the holiday of St. Patrick's Day. And that was just amazing. Ireland's beautiful. I love the culture. I love the people. And I just remember that I always have a soft spot in my heart for that particular show because of the beauty and because of who he was, St. Patrick. Just an amazing example of a man willing to suffer for his faith and take risks. I mean, he was not Irish. He was kidnapped by Irish and held as prisoner and was a shepherd in some really harsh conditions there. Through God's sort of miraculous leading, escapes, comes back to England, and really gets converted, becomes a priest, and goes back, decides he's going to be a missionary to the very people who had kidnapped him and oppressed him. And that was back when what was called Hibernia at the time, Ireland now, was very dark. It had a lot of sorcery and druids and magic, and just his life is just heroic in ways that are difficult to even comprehend. So that is a real highlight for me. But as far as other locations, I always tell people that it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And it's the site that's the best contender for the crucifixion location. And what is a surprise for a lot of people is that it's not very far away from what is recognized as being probably the likely burial site for Christ as well. And so you can visit both of these these locations within this huge church complex that they've built. And it's a very sort of holy place, a very sacred place for me. And it's always crowded, but not always. There are some times where the crowds thin out a little bit, and you can spend some time just in the quiet. But it's very kind of haunting and sacred and holy, and you could just literally spend all day in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So that is definitely my favorite place on planet Earth, other than my own house when I come back through the threshold after a 3-week trip and I get to see my wife and kids and dog. And that's always my favorite place.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing.
We've really been blessed by your series. Guys, go check it out. Drive Thru History. Phenomenal editing and super enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, make sure you go watch it, because Dave has probably spent hours on the computer sweat, blood, and tears to edit those videos for you guys. And like he said, all of it is now at our fingertips. We also dropped the new hats and tees. Make sure you guys check that out. The link below on the merch store. As usual, you can get the old Lect hat. Thanks so much, Dave. Thanks so much for joining us. Dave. It was a blessing.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, Samson. It's been a pleasure. God bless you guys on the road ahead for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.